I always believed family came first. Growing up, I learned that blood ties were sacred bonds that should never be broken. Even after my parents divorced, I maintained strong relationships with both of them. My father was someone I deeply respected and trusted. He raised me to believe in honesty and integrity. So when he asked me to lie for him and my half-brother, I never imagined it would shatter everything I believed about family. Before I dive into how my father tried to destroy my life for his own protection, let me know where you are tuning in from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what is right. I grew up in a small town just outside Seattle where everyone knew everyone. My parents split when I was 10 years old, but unlike many divorces, they managed to keep things civil for my sake. They never badmouthed each other, and I spent equal time with both of them. When I was 15, my father remarried a woman named Angela. She was nice enough, though we never developed the deep bond that some stepchildren and stepparents form. A year after they married, my half-brother Thomas was born. I was 16 then, and despite the age gap, I adored him from the moment I first held him. Thomas had these bright blue eyes that seemed to take in everything around him with wonder. Even as a teenager, dealing with my own issues, I made time to visit and play with him. Now, at 27, working as a software engineer at a promising tech startup, I still tried to be present in his life. Despite the divorce, my relationship with my father remained strong through the years. We bonded over fishing trips to Lake Washington, where he taught me patience and persistence. We attended Seattle Seahawks games together, shouting ourselves hoarse in support of our team. When I struggled with math in high school, he spent weekends helping me understand equations and formulas. When it came time for college, my father helped me navigate financial aid forms and contributed what he could to my education. He even helped me buy my first car, a used Honda that got me through 4 years of college without major issues. He was always there with practical advice about careers, relationships, and life in general. My father owned a construction company that had grown from a small operation to a respectable business with multiple crews working throughout the Seattle area. He built houses, renovated commercial spaces, and occasionally took on municipal contracts. From what I could see, he was successful, respected in the community, and the embodiment of the American dream. He started with nothing but his tools, and built something substantial through hard work and determination. At least that was what I believed. I looked up to him as the perfect role model. He seemed to embody everything I aspired to be: hardworking, honest, family-oriented, and successful on his own terms. Never once did I question his integrity or the way he conducted his business. That blind trust would later come back to haunt me in ways I could never have imagined. The first sign that something might be amiss came during a routine Sunday dinner at my father and Angela's house. These dinners were a monthly tradition, a way to stay connected despite our busy lives. Thomas, now 11, was talking excitedly about his soccer team making the regional finals. Angela was preparing her famous pot roast in the kitchen, and I was helping set the table when my father's phone rang. He stepped into his home office to take the call, but even with the door closed, I could hear his voice rising. Words like paperwork and inspections filtered through the door, followed by it, "will be handled," in a tone I rarely heard him use. When he emerged 10 minutes later, his face was flushed, and the relaxed demeanor he usually carried was replaced by tight shoulders and a forced smile. "Everything okay, Dad?" I asked as he grabbed a beer from the refrigerator. "Just business stress, Guadalupe," he replied, taking a long swig. "Nothing for you to worry about." I nodded, accepting his explanation without question. After all, running a business came with challenges, and he had always managed them before. Still, something about his reaction left me feeling slightly uneasy. It was like seeing a hairline crack in a foundation that had always seemed solid. But I pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on enjoying dinner with my family. That small crack would soon expand into a gaping chasm. About a week after that dinner, my father called and asked if we could meet for coffee before work. The urgency in his voice was unusual, so I agreed without hesitation. We met at a small cafe near my office, and I immediately noticed something was wrong. My father, usually impeccably dressed in business casual attire, looked disheveled. His normally neatly combed hair was uncombed, and dark circles underlined his eyes. "I need your help, son," he said after ordering our coffees, his voice lower than usual. "The business is under investigation." My stomach dropped. Investigation. For what it is. Just a misunderstanding about some permits and inspections, he explained, waving his hand dismissively. Bureaucratic nonsense. They are looking for any excuse to fine small businesses these days. I nodded, waiting for him to continue the unease from the previous week, returning tenfold. I need a small favor, he continued, leaning forward. If anyone asks, I need you to say you worked as a consultant on a few of my job sites last year. Just that you helped review some of the safety protocols and permit applications. The request immediately set off alarm bells in my head. But I did not do that, Dad. I do not know anything about construction permits or safety protocols. It is just a formality, he insisted. Just to fix some paperwork errors. Nothing serious. He reached across the table and put his hand on my arm. Please, Guadalupe. I would not ask if it was not important. Looking into his worried eyes, I felt a battle between my instincts, warning me something was wrong, and my desire to help the man who had always been there for me. Eventually, loyalty won out over caution. Okay, I agreed reluctantly. But nothing illegal, right? Just saying I helped review some paperwork. Of course, he said, relief washing over his face. Nothing illegal? Thank you, son. This means a lot to me. As I walked to my office afterward, I could not shake the feeling that I had just agreed to something I would regret. But I trusted my father. I believed he would never ask me to do anything that would put me in real jeopardy. That trust was the first casualty in what would become a war for my conscience. The uneasiness followed me home that evening. Instead of relaxing or catching up on my favorite shows, I found myself hunched over my laptop, searching for information about building codes and permit requirements in our county. The complex regulations and terminology were foreign to me, but I wanted to understand exactly what my father might be involved in. During my research, a news article from the local paper caught my attention. It mentioned ongoing investigations into construction safety violations throughout the Seattle area, with several companies under scrutiny after a series of accidents. My father's company was not mentioned specifically, but the timing seemed too coincidental to ignore. With growing concern, I called my mother. Though she and my father had been divorced for 17 years, she knew him better than most. After some small talk, I carefully broached the subject. Mom, did Dad ever have issues with his business, like cutting corners or problems with inspections? There was a long pause on the line before she answered. Why are you asking, Guadalupe? I explained about the coffee meeting, and my father's strange request, trying to sound casual despite my growing anxiety. Be careful about getting involved in your father's business matters, she warned, her voice tight with concern. During our marriage, there were times when he would cut corners if it meant saving money or time. Nothing major that I knew of, but enough that it caused arguments between us. He always said it was just how the construction industry worked. Her words settled like a stone in my stomach. That night, sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned, torn between loyalty to my father and the growing suspicion that he was asking me to participate in something wrong. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his worried face across the coffee table, pleading for my help. But I also remembered the values he himself had taught me growing up: honesty, integrity, doing the right thing even when it was difficult. The following week, my worst fears began to materialize. A call came while I was at work from a number I did not recognize. The woman on the line identified herself as Diane Reynolds, an investigator with the State Department responsible for occupational safety and construction oversight. Mr. Teen, Martinez, we understand you provided consulting services for Martinez Construction on several projects last year, she said, her tone professionally neutral. We would like to schedule an interview to discuss your role in those projects. My heart pounded so loudly, I was sure she could hear it through the phone. I would need to check my schedule, I stammered, buying time. Can I call you back to set something up? After hanging up, panic sent me into a frenzied, deeper dive into my father's business. Using public records and permit databases accessible online, I searched for anything connected to Martinez Construction. What I found made my blood run cold. 6 months ago, a partial collapse had occurred at one of my father's construction sites. 3 workers had been injured, one seriously. The incident report cited multiple safety violations, including inadequate temporary supports and substandard materials. Further digging revealed a pattern of similar violations at other sites, with fines paid but problems apparently continuing. The most shocking discovery came when I found documentation listing consultants for various projects. There, alongside several legitimate-sounding companies, was my name on 2 projects, and to my horror, my 11-year-old half-brother Thomas listed as a safety compliance consultant on 3 others. The dates aligned with school breaks as if someone had carefully checked when a child might theoretically be available for work. In that moment, everything became crystal clear. My father was not just asking me to cover up some minor paperwork errors. He wanted me to corroborate a fiction that he had created to either funnel money or distribute responsibility. And he had dragged not only me, but also Thomas into his scheme. I felt physically ill. Without thinking twice, I grabbed my keys and drove straight to my father's house. It was mid-afternoon on a Tuesday, and I knew he would likely be in his home office. Angela would be at work, and Thomas at school, giving us privacy for what I knew would be an ugly confrontation. When he opened the door, surprise registered on his face. "Guadalupe, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be at work? We need to talk," I said, pushing past him into the house. Now, in his office, I confronted him with everything I had discovered. At first, he tried to deny it, claiming I had misunderstood or that the records I found were incorrect. But as I laid out detail after damning detail, his denials weakened and finally he collapsed into his leather office chair, the facade crumbling. "You do not understand the pressures of running a business in this economy," he said, running his hands through his hair. "The margins are razor thin. Everyone cuts corners, Guadalupe. Everyone. If you do not, you go under." "Cutting corners is one thing," I replied, my voice shaking with anger. "Putting workers in danger is another. And involving me and Thomas, your 11-year-old son. What were you thinking?" His face hardened. Then a look I had rarely seen directed at me. "I was thinking about keeping this family afloat, about making sure Thomas has a college fund, about maintaining the lifestyle we have all gotten used to, by committing fraud, by risking people's lives. It is not that simple," he shouted, slamming his fist on the desk. Then, as if realizing his outburst would not help, he took a deep breath and spoke more calmly. "Look, I made some mistakes. The building materials we were supposed to get fell through, and we had to use substitutes to meet the deadline. It was a one-time thing that went wrong." "And listing me and Thomas as consultants. Was that a one-time thing too?" He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "I needed to move some money around for tax purposes. It was easier to list family members. No one was supposed to look that closely, but they are looking, Dad, and now they want to interview me." My voice broke slightly. "What exactly are you asking me to do here?" He looked up then, desperation clear in his eyes. "If you do not back up what's in those papers, both Thomas and I could face serious consequences. They could take everything we have. Thomas could lose his college fund, his future. Do you want that for your brother?" The emotional manipulation was blatant, but effective. I thought about Thomas, innocent in all this, yet potentially suffering for our father's actions. The thought of him losing his future opportunities twisted my heart. "Remember when you were 12 and those kids were bullying you at school?" My father continued, sensing my hesitation. "Who stood up for you? Who went to the principal and made sure it stopped? Remember when your car broke down in college during finals week? Who drove 3 hours to come get you and paid for the repairs?" Each memory he invoked was like a weight added to my shoulders. He had been there for me during crucial moments in my life. Now he was asking me to be there for him and Thomas during their time of need. But what he was asking went against everything I believed was right. "It is just this one time," he pressed. "I will make things right afterward, I promise. No more cutting corners, no more creative accounting. But I need your help to get through this investigation first." As I left his house that day, I felt torn in half. The father I thought I knew would never put me in such a position. Yet here he was asking me to lie, to protect him from the consequences of his own actions, and using my love for my half-brother as leverage. The worst part was that a small voice inside me was still considering doing as he asked out of some misguided sense of family loyalty. That realization scared me more than anything else. Over the next few days, the pressure intensified dramatically. I received an official letter requesting my presence for an interview regarding my consulting work for Martinez Construction. The formal legal language made the potential consequences of lying even more real to me. Perjury. obstruction of justice, conspiracy. These were not minor offenses, but serious crimes that could derail my own life and career. My father began calling daily, sometimes multiple times, asking if I had scheduled the interview yet and coaching me on what to say. Keep it simple, he advised. Just say you reviewed the safety protocols on paper. You never actually visited the sites. That way you cannot be expected to know details about the actual construction. The calculated nature of his instructions made me realize this was not a panicked reaction, but a deliberate strategy. He had thought this through, considering how to craft a lie that would be difficult to disprove. The realization made me sick. Then came the emotional warfare. One evening, I opened my door to find Thomas standing there, backpack slung over his shoulder. "Dad said I could stay with you tonight," he announced with a grin that did not quite reach his eyes. "Is that okay?" Of course, I welcomed him in. We played video games and ordered pizza, but throughout the evening, he kept bringing up concerning topics that seemed rehearsed. "Dad's been really stressed lately," he mentioned while we were playing Mario Kart. "He's not sleeping well. Later, as we ate pizza, I heard Mom crying last night. She said something bad might happen to our family. And most devastatingly, as I was setting up the sofa bed for him, I'm scared Dad might have to go away, Guadalupe. What would happen to me if he did?" Looking into his innocent face, I felt a rage building toward our father for putting this child in such a position. Thomas was clearly being used as an emotional pawn, coached to say things that would maximize my guilt. Yet the fear in his eyes was genuine. He did not understand the full situation, only that something threatened his secure world. The next day, after dropping Thomas at school, I received a tearful call from Angela. "Please, Guadalupe," she begged between sobs. "Your father made mistakes, but he was only trying to provide for his family. Thomas needs his father. I need my husband. Our whole world will collapse without him." The constant emotional assault was taking its toll. I found it hard to focus at work. I started having trouble sleeping, lying awake, weighing my options and their consequences. My appetite disappeared, and colleagues commented on my tired appearance. I felt trapped in an impossible situation where every choice led to someone getting hurt. In an attempt to clear my head and consider the full picture, I researched the building collapse more thoroughly. Local news archives provided more details than I had initially found. The most seriously injured worker was a man named Jason Reyes, 42, a carpenter with 15 years of experience. The collapse had crushed his legs, requiring multiple surgeries. 6 months later, he remained unable to work. A community fundraising page for his family revealed he had 3 children under the age of 10. His wife had taken on extra shifts as a nurse's aide to compensate for his lost income, but they were struggling to cover medical expenses not fully covered by workers' compensation. The most recent update mentioned they might lose their home. These were real people suffering real consequences from my father's corner cutting. Yet, in all our conversations, my father had never once expressed concern for Jason or the other injured workers. His focus remained entirely on protecting himself, his assets, and by extension, Thomas's future. This realization was still fresh when my father called again. This time his tone had changed. The pleading was replaced by something harder, more threatening. "I've been thinking," he said without preamble. "I've already told the investigators you were involved in reviewing those sites, that you gave your approval on the safety measures. You did what I felt cold dread spreading through me. If you do not back me up now, you will go down too. They will think you were part of it all along. Is that what you want? To ruin your own life too?" The threat was unmistakable. My own father was willing to implicate me to save himself. In that moment, something broke inside me. The father I thought I knew would never sacrifice his son. The man on the phone was a stranger wearing my father's voice. After that call, I spiraled into a deep depression. I called in sick to work for 2 days, barely able to get out of bed. The betrayal cut deeper than any pain I had ever experienced. This was the man who had taught me about integrity and doing what was right, now asking me to compromise everything I believed in, worse, threatening to drag me down if I refused. During those dark days, I seriously considered just going along with his lies. Maybe it would all blow over. Maybe the consequences would not be as severe as I feared. Maybe protecting my family was worth compromising my principles. Then came the nightmare. I dreamed of Jason Reyes's children, their faces indistinct, but their cries painfully clear as they watched their father suffer while their lives fell apart. I woke up in a cold sweat, finally seeing with complete clarity what I had to do. I could not be part of perpetuating an injustice that had already caused so much suffering. No family loyalty was worth that price. If I lied, I would never be able to look at myself in the mirror again. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer specializing in construction litigation to understand my options. She was brutally honest about the situation. If you lie under oath, you could face perjury charges, she explained. And if they can prove you knew about the fraud beforehand or benefited from it in any way, you could be considered an accessory. On the other hand, if you cooperate fully and can demonstrate you had no prior knowledge or involvement, you're likely to be viewed as a witness rather than a suspect. The path forward was clear, though not easy. I called the investigator Diane Reynolds and scheduled the interview for the following day. Then, steeling myself for what would be the most difficult conversation of my life, I called my father. "I'm going to tell them the truth," I said when he answered. "All of it. I was never a consultant for your company. I never reviewed any safety protocols, and I certainly never gave approval for anything related to those construction sites." The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought he might have hung up. Then came his response, cold and cutting. "You would betray your own family. After everything I have done for you, you are no son of mine. If you do this, you are dead to me, dead to this family." The words were meant to wound, and they did. But they also confirmed I was making the right choice. A father who truly loved his son would not make such threats, would not ask his child to commit crimes on his behalf. "I'm sorry it came to this," I said, my voice steady despite the pain. "But I cannot lie for you. Not about this." He hung up without another word. The next day, I sat across from Diane Reynolds and two other investigators in a sterile government office. For 3 hours, I told them everything I knew. I explained that I had never worked as a consultant for my father's company in any capacity. I showed them proof of my full-time employment elsewhere during the periods in question. I revealed what I had discovered about Thomas being listed as a consultant, despite being only 11 years old. When they asked why my father would involve me in this way, I was honest about that too. He thought I would lie to protect him because of our family relationship, and for a while I considered it. But I cannot be part of covering up actions that hurt innocent people. The weight that lifted from my shoulders after telling the truth was immense. For weeks I had been carrying the burden of an impossible choice. Now, having chosen integrity over blind loyalty, I could breathe again, even knowing the difficult consequences that would follow. The investigators were professional and surprisingly sympathetic. "You did the right thing," Diane told me as the interview concluded. "Family situations like this are always the hardest, but lying would have only made things worse for everyone, including you." Within a week, my father was arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud, negligence, and obstruction of justice. The case made local news, bringing public attention to the safety violations that had led to the building collapse. Because Thomas was a minor and clearly had no knowledge or involvement in the scheme, his name was protected and cleared of any wrongdoing. My relationship with my father's family became complicated. Angela initially blamed me for the family's troubles, unable to see that my father's own actions had created the situation. She refused to let me see Thomas, which broke my heart. But as the weeks passed and the full extent of my father's deceptions came to light through the legal proceedings, her anger toward me softened. 3 months after my father's arrest, I received a text from Angela. "Thomas misses you. Would you like to take him to his soccer game this weekend?" That small olive branch meant everything. When I picked Thomas up, there was initial awkwardness, but by halftime of his game, we were back to our old rapport. Kids are resilient, and while he was confused about what had happened with our father, he understood more than adults sometimes give children credit for. "Dad did something wrong. Did not he asked as I drove him home. "That is why he has to be away." "Yes," I answered, seeing no reason to lie. "He made some bad choices in his business that hurt people. But that does not mean he does not love you." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "Mom said you told the truth even though it was hard. She said that was brave." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back. Angela's acknowledgement conveyed through Thomas meant more than she could know. Meanwhile, I found a way to make some small amends for my father's actions. I contacted Jason Reyes, the worker most seriously injured in the collapse. Initially hesitant, he eventually agreed to meet for coffee. Facing him was one of the hardest things I have ever done. His pain was evident not just in his physical movements, but in his eyes. I cannot undo what my father's negligence caused, I told him, but I want to help however I can. Together with some colleagues from my tech company, we organized a fundraiser for Jason's family and the other injured workers. We created a website sharing their stories and coordinated with local businesses for support. The community response was overwhelming, raising enough to cover Jason's remaining medical expenses and provide financial cushion for his family while he continued his long rehabilitation. My father refused to see or speak to me after his arrest. Through his lawyer, he sent a message that I was no longer his son in any way that mattered. The rejection hurt, but I recognized it as the desperate lashing out of a man unwilling to take responsibility for his own actions. In the months that followed, I struggled with guilt despite knowing I had made the right choice. Therapy helped me process the betrayal and loss. My therapist helped me understand that true loyalty is not about blindly supporting someone's harmful actions, but about caring enough to hold them accountable. My mother became a surprising source of strength during this time. "You did what your father himself raised you to do," she assured me. "He taught you about integrity and honesty. You honored those values even when he could not." Gradually, I rebuilt my sense of what family means. I realized that family is not just about blood ties, but about relationships built on mutual respect, support, and honesty. I deepened connections with friends who had stood by me through the ordeal. I maintained my relationship with Thomas, determined to be a positive influence in his life. Concerned about Thomas's future, I set up a trust fund for his education with my own savings. It was not as substantial as what my father might have provided, but it was honest money that came with no strings attached. The most profound lesson I learned through this painful experience was the difference between true loyalty and blind loyalty. True loyalty sometimes means making the hardest choice because it is the right one. It means caring enough about someone to not enable their self-destruction. It means understanding that integrity cannot be compromised without losing something essential about yourself. I also learned that enabling wrongdoing is never an act of love. My father claimed all his actions were to provide for his family, but his choices ultimately hurt all of us far more deeply than financial struggles ever could. He robbed Thomas of a father's presence during important years of his development. He betrayed my trust in the most fundamental way, and he caused serious harm to innocent workers who were just trying to make a living. The path of integrity is often the most difficult one. It can mean standing alone. It can mean facing harsh judgment from those who do not understand or do not want to understand. But it is the only path that allows you to live at peace with yourself. Finding that peace took time. There were days when I questioned my choice, when the loss of my relationship with my father felt too high a price to pay. But those moments became less frequent as I saw the positive impacts of choosing truth. Jason Reyes gradually improved and eventually returned to light work. Thomas developed a more nuanced understanding of right and wrong through our conversations about what had happened. As for my father, his case eventually went to trial, and he was sentenced to 4 years in prison. The construction company was dissolved, its assets used to pay fines and settlements to the injured workers. I attended the sentencing hearing, sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom. He never turned to look at me, but I needed to be there to see the conclusion of this painful chapter. Sometimes I wonder if my father will ever find redemption. If in the quiet of his cell he might reflect on his choices and recognize where he went wrong. I hope for that, not just for his sake, but for Thomas's as well. I hope my brother can eventually have a relationship with his father that is based on honesty rather than manipulation. I often think about what true family loyalty really means. Is it standing by someone no matter what they do, or is it holding them to the standards they themselves claim to value? I believe now it is the latter. Real loyalty means wanting the best for someone, even when that means they must face consequences for their actions. In the end, we each create our own moral compass through the difficult choices we make when principles and emotions collide. My compass was tested in the most painful way possible, but it ultimately pointed me toward truth. And despite the losses that choice entailed, I found a freedom in that truth that no comfortable lie could ever provide. Have you ever faced a situation where doing the right thing meant betraying someone you loved? What did you choose and how did it change you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more reflections on the complex moral choices we face in life. Remember that integrity once lost is incredibly difficult to rebuild. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to choose truth, even when it is the hardest path.